Hello, everyone. It's Vexing Cat. Welcome back. Welcome, Shy Mellow. Thank you for the follow. And I guess Bot's not messing around. I wonder what they said that it got deleted. All right. Well, generally speaking, I hope everyone had a good couple of days off. I know on Monday I was hiking up in the mountains, so I took a Monday off, which is why I didn't schedule a reading stream for Monday. But those of you not familiar with my content, hello. I am Vexing Cat, your local tiger librarian. Currently, we are reading Tarzan of the Apes by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Last week on Wednesday, we read a little bit more of this book. We started the book and read the first 4 chapters. And this is where we're going to continue from. We're starting with chapter 5. We'll probably read 4 or 5 chapters today, depending on pacing, ad breaks, that sort of thing. I try to get as many ads out of the way as possible at the beginning, so that way I have a little bit of breathing room for when I have to run an ad between chapters. And anyway, I hope all of you are doing well. Thank you for watching. And if you're not familiar, you are all my Librophiles. And Librophile means lover of libraries and books. Not just bibliophile, which is just books, but Librophile, both libraries and books. Which, if you're like new here, it just means I do a lot of literature reading, occasionally gaming streams. I've been trying to incorporate more.
Hi.
Hi. One of my lovely emotes from Yuki. Also, hello, Carmela. Welcome in. And I've got my water, I've got my coffee, I've got everything that I need to get started. So, to all of you, make sure you're hydrating, stretching, grabbing a snack, doing whatever it is that you need to get comfortable for the story. Thanks, Carmelo. Jot that down. I think you and I was in here somewhere. Yep, hello. Let's start at the top. We've got Copyright 53. Welcome in. I love the frog emote. Kazman, always a pleasure. Shy Mellow, Carmelo, and you and I. Fantastic. And I imagine there's 1 or 2 others out there that are watching that are being quiet, which by all means. All right, we return to Tarzan of the Apes, Chapter 5, The White Ape. Was this the format? I'm pretty sure this is the format we were reading from before. Yes, okay. The White Ape. Tenderly Kala nursed her little waif, wondering silently why did it not gain strength and agility as did the little apes of other mothers. It was nearly a year from the time the little fellow came into her possession before he would walk alone. And as for climbing, my, but how stupid he was. Kala sometimes talked with the older females about her young hopeful, but none of them could understand how a child could be so slow. Oh, that's interesting. There we go. That should fix it. Yeah, that's better. Why it could not even find food alone. Oh, let's see. Go back a little bit. Kala sometimes talked with the older females about her young hopeful, but none of them could understand how a child could be so slow and backward in learning to care for itself. Why, it could not even find food alone, and more than 12 moons had passed since Kala had come upon it. Had they known that the child had seen 13 moons before it had come into Kala's possession, they would have considered its case as absolutely hopeless. For the little apes of their own tribe were as far advanced in 2 or 3 moons as was this little stranger after 25. Tublat, Calla's husband was sorely vexed, and but for the female's careful watching would have put the child out of the way. He will never be a great ape, he argued. Always will you have to carry him and protect him. What good will he be to the tribe? None, only a burden. Let us leave him quietly sleeping among the tall grasses, that you may bear other and stronger apes to guard us in our old age. Never, Broken Nose, replied Calla. If I must carry him forever, so be it. And then Tublat went to Kerchak to urge him to use his authority with Calla and force her to give up little Tarzan, which was the name they had given to the tiny Lord Greystoke, and which meant white skin. But when Kerchak spoke to her about it, Calla threatened to run away from the tribe if they did not leave her in peace with the child, and as this is one of the inalienable rights of the jungle folk, if they be dissatisfied among their own people, they bothered her no more. For Calla was a fine, clean-limbed young female, and they did not wish to lose her. As Tarzan grew, he made more rapid strides, so that by the time he was 10 years old, he was an excellent climber, and on the ground could do many wonderful things which were beyond the powers of his little brothers and sisters. In many ways did he differ from them, and they often marveled at his superior cunning. But in strength and size he was deficient, for at 10 the greatest anthropoids were fully grown, some of them towering over 6 feet in height, while little Tarzan was still but a half-grown boy. Yet such a boy! From early infancy he had used his hands to swing from branch to branch after the manner of his giant mother, and as he grew older he spent hour upon hour daily speeding through the tree tops with his brothers and sisters. He could spring 20 feet across space at the dizzy heights of the forest top, and grasp with unerring precision and without apparent jar a limb waving wildly in the path of an approaching tornado. He could drop 20 feet at a stretch from limb to limb in rapid descent to the ground, or he could gain the utmost pinnacle of the loftiest tropical giant with the ease and swiftness of a squirrel. Though but 10 years old, he was fully as strong as the average man of 30, and far more agile than the most practiced athlete ever becomes, and day by day his strength was increasing. His life among these fierce apes had been happy, for his recollection held no other life, nor did he know that there existed within the universe aught else than his little forest and the wild jungle animals with which he was familiar. He was nearly 10 before he commenced to realize that a great difference existed between himself and his fellows. His little body, burned brown by exposure, suddenly caused him feelings of intense shame, for he realized that it was entirely hairless, like some low snake or other reptile. He attempted to obviate this by plastering himself from head to foot with mud. Am I saying that? Obviate. Okay. To remove or need or difficulty, preclude, prevent, get rid of. Interesting. Remove this. Obviate. He attempted to obviate this by plastering himself from head to foot with mud, but this dried and fell off. Besides, It felt so uncomfortable that he quickly decided that he preferred the shame to the discomfort. In the higher land which his tribe frequented was a little lake, and it was here that Tarzan first saw his face in the clear, still waters of its bosom. It was on a sultry day of the dry season that he and one of his cousins had gone down to the bank to drink. As they leaned over, both little faces were mirrored on the placid pool, the fierce and terrible features of the ape beside those of the aristocratic scion of an old English house. You thinking over there, are you? Hmm. Tarzan was appalled. It had been it had been it had been bad enough to be hairless, but to own such a countenance, he wondered that the other apes could look at him at all. That tiny slit of a mouth and those puny white teeth, how they looked beside the mighty lips and powerful fangs of his more fortunate brothers. And the little pinched nose of him, so thin was it that it looked half starved. He turned red as he compared it with the beautiful broad nostrils of his companion.
Goose of Business just followed.
Welcome in, Goose of Business. Would you prefer to be called Goose? And I'm glad that I'm giving you ideas. That is quite the emote. Such a generous nose. Why, it spread half across his face. It certainly must be fine to be so handsome, thought poor little Tarzan. But when he saw his own eyes, that was the final blow. A brown spot, a gray circle, and then blank whiteness. Frightful, not even the snakes had such hideous eyes as he. So intent was he upon this personal appraisement of his features that he did not hear the parting of the tall grass behind him as a great body pushed itself stealthily through the jungle, nor did his companion, the ape, hear either, for he was drinking, and the noise of his sucking lips and gurgles of satisfaction drowned the quiet approach of the intruder. Not 30 paces behind the two she crouched. Sabor, the huge lioness, lashing her tail. Cautiously she moved a great padded paw forward. Noiselessly placing it before her, she lifted the next. Thus she advanced, her belly low, almost touching the surface of the ground. A great cat preparing to spring upon its prey. Now she was within 10 feet of the two unsuspecting little playfellows. Carefully, she drew her hind feet well up beneath her body, the great muscles rolling under the beautiful skin. So low was she crouching now that she seemed flattened to the earth except for the upward bend of the glossy back as it gathered for the spring. No longer the tail lashed. Quiet and straight behind her it lay. An instant she paused thus, as though turned to stone, and then, with an awful scream, she sprang. Sabor, the lioness, was a wise hunter. To one less wise, the wild alarm of her fierce cry as she sprang would have seemed a foolish thing. For could she not more surely have fallen upon her victims had she but quietly leaped without that loud shriek? But Sabor knew well the wondrous quickness of the jungle folk and their almost unbelievable powers of hearing. To them, the sudden scraping of one blade of grass across another was as effectual a warning as her loudest cry, and Sabor knew that she could not make that mighty leap without a little noise. Her wild scream was not a warning. It was voiced to freeze her poor victims in paralysis of terror for the tiny fraction of an instant which would suffice for her mighty claws to sink into their soft flesh and hold them beyond peradventure of escape. In so far as the ape was concerned, Sabor reasoned correctly. The little fellow crouched, trembling, just an instant, but that instant was quite long enough to prove his undoing. Not so, however, with Tarzan, the man-child. His life amidst the dangers of the jungle had taught him to meet emergencies with self-confidence, and his higher intelligence resulted in a quickness of mental action far beyond the powers of the apes. So the scream of Sabor, the lioness, galvanized the brain and muscles of little Tarzan into instant action. Before him lay the deep waters of the little lake. Behind him, certain death, a cruel death beneath tearing claws and rending fangs. Tarzan had always hated water, except as a medium for quenching his thirst. He hated it because he connected it with the chill and discomfort of the torrential rains, and he feared it for the thunder and lightning and wind which accompanied them. The deep waters of the lake he had been taught by his wild mother to avoid, and further, had he not seen little Nita sink beneath its quiet surface only a few short weeks before, never to return to the tribe? But of the two evils, his quick mind chose the lesser ere the first note of Sabor's scream had scarce broken the quiet of the jungle, and before the great beast had covered half her leap, Tarzan felt the chill waters close above his head. He could not swim, and the water was very deep, but still he lost no particle of that self-confidence and resourcefulness which were the badges of his superior being. Rapidly, he moved his hands and feet in an attempt to scramble upward, and possibly more by chance than design, he fell into the stroke that a dog uses when swimming, so that within a few seconds his nose was above water, and he found that he could keep it there by continuing his strokes, and also make progress through the water. He was much surprised and pleased with this new acquirement which had been so suddenly thrust upon him, but he had no time for thinking much upon it. He was now swimming parallel to the bank, and there he saw the cruel beast that would have seized him crouching upon the still form of his little playmate. The lioness was intently watching Tarzan, evidently expecting him to return to shore, but this the boy had no intention of doing. Instead, he raised his voice in the call of distress common to his tribe, adding to it the warning which would prevent would-be rescuers from running into the clutches of Sabor. Almost immediately there came an answer from the distance, and presently 40 or 50 great apes swung rapidly and majestically through the trees toward the scene of tragedy. In the van was Kala, for she had recognized the tones of her best beloved, and with her was the mother of the little ape who lay dead beneath cruel Sabor. Though more powerful and better equipped for fighting than the apes, the lioness had no desire to meet these enraged adults, and with a snarl of hatred she sprang quickly into the brush and disappeared. Tarzan now swam to shore and clambered quickly upon dry land. The feeling of freshness and exhilaration which the cool waters had imparted to him filled his little being with grateful surprise, and ever after he lost no opportunity to take a daily plunge in lake or stream or ocean when it was possible to do so. For a long time, Kala could not accustom herself to the sight, for though her people could swim when forced to it, they did not like to enter water, and never did so voluntarily. The adventure with the lioness gave Tarzan food for pleasurable memories, for it was such affairs which broke the monotony of his daily life. Otherwise but a dull round of searching for food, eating, and sleeping. The tribe to which he belonged roamed a tract extending roughly 25 miles along the sea coast and some 50 miles inland. This they traversed almost continually, occasionally remaining for months in one locality. But as they moved through the trees with great speed, they often covered the territory in a few days. Much depended upon food supply, climatic conditions, and the prevalence of animals of the more dangerous species. Though Kerchak often led them on long marches for no other reason than that he had tired of remaining in the same place. At night they slept where darkness overtook them, lying upon the ground, and sometimes covering their heads and more seldom their bodies with the great leaves of the elephant's ear. 2 or 3 might lie cuddled in each other's arms for additional warmth if the night were chill, and thus Tarzan had slept in Kala's arms nightly for all these years. That the huge, fierce brute loved this child of another race is beyond question, and he too gave to the great hairy beast all the affection that would have belonged to his fair young mother had she lived.
Hi Gara,
Oh,
13
thank you for the
gifted 2 subscriptions to
gifted
the
sub,
community.
Sagara. That's very kind. I hope you're enjoying the story. Are you paying your library dues? Is that what's going on? You are. You are enjoying the story. That's great. That the huge, fierce brute loved this child of another race is beyond question, and he too gave to the great hairy beast all the affection that would have belonged to his fair young mother had she lived. When he was disobedient, she cuffed him, it is true, but she was never cruel to him and was more often caressing than chastising him. Tublat, her husband, always hated Tarzan, and on several occasions had come near ending his youthful career. Tarzan, on his part, never lost an opportunity to show that he fully reciprocated his foster father's sentiments, and whenever he could, safely annoy him, or make faces at him, or hurl insults upon him from the safety of his mother's arms, or the slender branches of the higher trees, he did so. His superior intelligence and cunning permitted him to invent 1,000 diabolical tricks to add to the burdens of Tublat's life. Early in his boyhood, he had learned to form ropes by twisting and tying long grasses together, and with these he was forever tripping Tublat or attempting to hang him from some overhanging branch. I imagine him. He's probably making traps to pull him into the canopy. Wild. By constant playing and experimenting with these, he learned to tie rude knots and make sliding nooses, and with these he and the younger apes amused themselves. What Tarzan did, they tried to do also, but he alone originated and became proficient. One day, while playing thus, Tarzan had thrown his rope at one of his fleeing companions, retaining the other end in his grasp. By accident, the noose fell squarely about the running ape's neck, bringing him to a sudden and surprising halt. Ah, here was a new game, a fine game, thought Tarzan, and immediately he attempted to repeat the trick. And thus, by painstaking and continued practice, he learned the art of roping. Now indeed was the life of Tublat a living nightmare. In sleep, upon the march, night or day, he never knew when the quiet noose would slip about his neck and nearly choke the life out of him. This is dark. Kala punished, Tublat swore dire vengeance. And old Kerchak took notice, and warned, and threatened, but all to no avail. Tarzan defied them all, and the thin, strong noose continued to settle about Tublat's neck whenever he least expected it. The other apes derived unlimited amusement from Tublat's discomfiture, for Broken Nose was a disagreeable old fellow whom no one liked anyway. In Tarzan's clever little mind, many thoughts resolved, and back of these was his divine power of reason. If he could catch his fellow apes with his long arm of many grasses, why not Sabor, the lioness? It was the germ of a thought, which, however, was destined to mull around in his conscience and subconscious mind, conscious and subconscious mind, until it resulted in magnificent achievement. But that came in later years. Well, as a friendly reminder between chapters, hydrate, caffeinate, grab a snack, do whatever it is that you need to relax and enjoy the story. Mm-hmm. I've actually got a bit of spruce syrup in my water today. It just makes for it very um very smooth. Oh, welcome in, Fallen. Yes, he's going to catch a very big cat. Um, I agree with you, Carmelo. It is a little oof. All I can say is this book is incredibly old, like astoundingly old. And the way we think and we observe is a very far cry from what is going on. My goodness. Let's see, grab this real quick. So this version of the book, while I'm thinking about it, was produced in 1914. So 110 years ago. So definitely a different thought process back then from now. Okay, should be able to hear me now. Yeah, I agree. Higara, you know what I'm talking about. 110 years ago, they were definitely uh, thinking and talking and saying very different things than today. Um, let's see here. We'll go pull that back up here. The good old days when they used to describe other cultures and people as barbarians or primitive instead of just different cultures and people. It was indeed a whole different world, for sure. Okay, kind of wish that the text filtering was a little bit smaller in size. Profanity filter off, check. Streams, check. Punctuation, check. Duration, fine. I don't know. I'm going to have to mess with the caption settings a little bit more, I think, eventually. One more thing to do. All right. We are on to Chapter 6, Jungle Battles. Indeed. The wanderings of the tribe brought them often near the closed and silent cabin by the little landlocked harbor. To Tarzan, this was always a source of never-ending mystery and pleasure. He would peek into the curtained windows, or climbing upon the roof, peer down the black depths of the chimney, in vain endeavor to solve the unknown wonders that lay within those strong walls. His little childish imagination pictured wonderful creatures within, and the very impossibility of forcing entrance added 1,000-fold to his desire to do so. Just like any other kid. He would clamber about the roof and windows for hours, attempting to discover means of ingress, but to the door he paid little attention, for this was apparently as solid as the walls. It was in the next visit to the vicinity, following the adventure with old Sabor, that, as he approached the cabin, Tarzan noticed that from a distance the door appeared as though an independent part of the wall in which it was set, and for the first time it occurred to him that this might prove the means of entrance which had so long eluded him. He was alone, as was often the case when he visited the cabin, for the apes had no love for it, the story of the thunderstick having lost nothing in the telling during these 10 years, had quite surrounded the white man's deserted abode with an atmosphere of weirdness and terror for the simians. The story of his own connection with the cabin had never been told him. The language of the apes was so few words that they could talk but little of what they had seen in the cabin, having no words to accurately describe either the strange people or their belongings. And so, long before Tarzan was old enough to understand, the subject had been forgotten by the tribe. Only in a dim, vague way had Kala explained to him that his father had been a strange white ape, but he did not know that Kala was not his own mother. On this day, then, he went directly to the door and spent hours examining it and fussing with the hinges, the knob, and the latch. Finally, he stumbled upon the right combination, and the door swung creakingly open before his astonished eyes. For some minutes he did not dare venture within. But finally, as his eyes became accustomed to the dim light of the interior, he slowly and cautiously entered. In the middle of the floor lay a skeleton, every vestige of flesh gone from the bones, to which still clung the mildewed and mouldered remnants of what had once been clothing. Upon the bed lay a similar gruesome thing, but smaller, while in a tiny cradle nearby was a third, a wee mite of a skeleton. To none of these evidences of a fearful tragedy of a long dead day, did little Tarzan give but passing heed. His wild jungle life had inured him to the sight of dead and dying animals, and he had known that he was looking upon the remains of his own, and had he known that he was looking upon the remnants of his own father and mother, he would have been no more greatly moved. The furnishings and other contents of the room, it was which riveted his attention. He examined many things minutely. Strange tools and weapons, books, papers, clothing, what little had withstood the ravages of time in the humid atmosphere of the jungle coast. He opened chests and cupboards, such as did not baffle his small experience, and in these he found the contents much better preserved. Among other things he found a sharp hunting knife, on the keen blade of which he immediately proceeded to cut his finger. Like every other child. Nothing daunted, he continued his experiments, finding that he could hack and hew splinters of wood from the table and chairs with his new toy. For a long time this amused him, but finally, tiring, he continued his explorations. In a cupboard filled with books, he came across one with brightly colored pictures. It was a child's illustrated alphabet. A is for Archer, who shoots with a bow. B is for Boy. His first name is Joe. The pictures interested him greatly. There were many apes with faces similar to his own, and further over in the book he found under, quote, M, unquote, some little monkeys such as he saw daily flitting through the trees of his primeval forest. But nowhere was pictured any of his own people. In all the book was none that resembled Kerchak or Tublat or Kala. At first he tried to pick the little figures from the leaves, but he soon saw that they were not real, though he knew not what they might be, nor had he any words to describe them. The boats and trains and cows and horses were quite meaningless to him, but not quite so baffling as the odd little figures which appeared beneath and between the colored pictures. Some strange kind of bug he thought they might be, for many of them had legs, though nowhere could he find one with eyes and a mouth. It was his first introduction to the letters of the alphabet, and he was over 10 years old. Of course, he had never before seen print, or never had spoken with any living thing which had the remotest idea that such a thing as a written language existed. Nor ever had he seen anyone reading, nor knew what anything like reading or language or written would mean. Silly. So what wonder that the little boy was quite at a loss to guess the meaning of these strange figures. Near the middle of the book he found his old enemy, Sabor the lioness, and further on, coiled Histah, the snake. Oh, it was most engrossing. Never before in all his 10 years had he enjoyed anything so much. So absorbed was he that he did not note the approaching dusk until it was quite upon him and the figures were blurred. He put the book back in the cupboard and closed the door, for he did not wish anyone else to find and destroy his treasure, and as he went out into the gathering darkness, he closed the great door of the cabin behind him, as it had been before he discovered the secret of its lock. But before he left, he had noticed the hunting knife lying where he had thrown it upon the floor, and this he picked up and took with him to show his fellows. He had taken scarce a dozen steps toward the jungle when a great form rose up before him from the shadows of a low bush. At first he thought it was one of his own people, but in another instant he realized that it was Bolgani, the huge gorilla. So close was he that there was no chance for flight, and little Tarzan knew that he must stand and fight for his life. For these great beasts were the deadly enemies of his tribe, and neither one or the other ever asked or gave quarter. Welcome in, Valis. Had Tarzan been a full-grown bull ape of the species of his tribe, he had been more than a match for the gorilla. But being only a little English boy, though enormously muscular for such, he stood no show against his cruel antagonist. In his veins, though, flowed the blood of the best of a race of mighty fighters, and back of this was the training of his short lifetime among the fierce brutes of the jungle. He knew no fear. As we know it, his little heart beat the faster but from the excitement and exhilaration of adventure. Had the opportunity presented itself, he would have escaped, but solely because his judgment told him he was no match for the great thing which confronted him. And since reason showed him that successful flight was impossible, he met the gorilla squarely and bravely without a tremor of a single muscle or any sign of panic. In fact, he met the brute midway in his change. Charge. That's why it looked weird. In fact, he met the brute midway in its charge, striking its huge body with his closed fists and as futilely as he had been a fly attacking an elephant. But in one hand, he still clutched the knife he had found in the cabin of his father, and as the brute, striking and biting, closed upon him, the boy accidentally turned the point toward the hairy breast. As it sank deep into the body of him, the gorilla shrieked in pain and rage. But the boy had learned in that brief second a use for this sharp and shiny toy, so that as the tearing, striking beast dragged him to the earth, he plunged the blade repeatedly into the hilt into its breast. Mind you, this is still a 10-year-old boy fighting a full-grown male gorilla. Wow. Wow. The gorilla, fighting after the manner of its kind, struck terrific blows with its open hand and tore the flesh at the boy's throat and chest with its mighty tusks. Tusks? Okay. For a moment they rolled upon the ground in the fierce frenzy of combat. More and more weakly the torn and bleeding arm struck home with the long, sharp blade. Then the little figure stiffened with a spasmodic jerk, and Tarzan, the young Lord Greystoke, rolled lifeless upon the dead and decaying vegetation which carpeted his jungle home. A mile back in the forest, the tribe had heard the fierce challenge of the gorilla, and, as was his custom, when any danger threatened, Kerchak called his people together. Partly for mutual protection against a common enemy, since the gorilla might be one of a party of several, and also to see that all members of the tribe were accounted for. It was soon discovered that Tarzan was missing, and Tublat was strongly opposed to sending assistance. Kerchak himself had no liking for the strange little waif, so he listened to Tublat, and finally, with a shrug of his shoulders, turned back to the pile of leaves on which he had made his bed. But Kala was of a different mind. In fact, she had not waited but to learn that Tarzan was absent ere she was fairly flying through the matted branches toward the point from which the cries of the gorilla were still plainly audible. Darkness had now fallen, and an early moon was sending its faint light to cast strange, grotesque shadows among the dense foliage of the forest. Here and there the brilliant rays penetrated to earth, but for the most part they only served to accentuate the Stygian blackness of the jungle's depths. Like some huge phantom, Kala swung noiselessly from tree to tree, now running nimbly along a great branch, now swinging through space at the end of another, only to grasp that of a further tree in her rapid progress toward the scene of the tragedy her knowledge of jungle life told her was being enacted a short distance before her. The cries of the gorilla proclaimed that it was in mortal combat with some other denizen of the fierce wood. Suddenly these cries ceased, and the silence of death reigned throughout the jungle. Kala could not understand, for the voice of Bolgani had at the last been raised in the agony of suffering and death. But no sound had come to her by which she possibly could determine the nature of his antagonist. That her little Tarzan could destroy a great bull gorilla she knew to be improbable. And so, as she neared the spot from which the sounds of the struggle had come, she moved more warily, and at last slowly, and with extreme caution she traversed the lowest branches, peering eagerly into the moon-splashed blackness for a sign of the combatants. Presently she came upon them, lying in a little open space full under the brilliant light of the moon. Little Tarzan's torn and bloody form, and beside it a great bull gorilla, stone dead. With a low cry, Kala rushed to Tarzan's side and gathered the poor, blood-covered body to her breast, listened for a sign of life. Faintly she heard it, the weak beating of the little heart. Tenderly she bore him back through the inky jungle to where the tribe lay, and for many days and nights she sat guard beside him, bringing him food and water and brushing the flies and other insects from his cruel wounds. I decided that read to me, Tiger Mommy, in all caps was too degen, so we're going with yay Vexstream and pop into the lurker verse. Fair enough. Don't forget to use exclamation lurk if you want to tuck away into the inner, like back rooms of the library. Yeah. Wandered into the do not disturb section. Welcome in, Lasada. Good seeing you. Hello. Of medicine or surgery, the poor thing knew nothing. She could but lick the wounds, and thus she kept them cleansed, that healing nature might the more quickly do her work. At first Tarzan would eat nothing, but rolled and tossed in a wild delirium of fever. All he craved was water, and this she brought him in the only way she could, bearing it in her own mouth. No human mother could have shown more unselfish and sacrificing devotion than did this poor wild brute for the little orphaned waif whom fate had thrown into her keeping. At last the fever abated, and the boy commenced to mend. No word of complaint passed his tight-set lips, though the pain of his wounds was excruciating. A portion of his chest was laid bare to the ribs, 3 of which had been broken by the mighty blows of the gorilla. One arm was nearly severed by the giant fangs, and a great piece had been torn from his neck, exposing his jugular vein, which the cruel jaws had missed but by a miracle. With the stoicism of the brutes who had raised him, he endured his suffering quietly, preferring to crawl away from the others and lie huddled in some clump of tall grasses rather than show his misery before their eyes. Kala alone he was glad to have with him, but now that he was better, she was gone longer at a time, in search of food. For the devoted animal had scarcely eaten enough to support her own life, while Tarzan had been so low, and was in consequence reduced to a mere shadow of her former self. Whoo, doggy! That was wild. So my goodness, Kala is the I think this is an interesting way to show how much Kala, his foster adopted mom, cares for Tarzan. That and it's wild to me that he would survive and that like he would start to mend with a nearly severed arm and a chunk missing out of his throat and his ribs laid bare. That the human body is incredible. Always happy to help. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have things that I must complete, so y'all are just audio. That is completely fair, Neff. For those of you not familiar with Neff, Neff is what I would consider my compatriot as a reader. Let me give you a shout out, Neff. Whoop. Goodness, don't know where I've been. We were on, yep, we were on 7. Yeah, okay, we're on 7. I clicked on the wrong thing and here we are. So let's do a little shout out for Mr. Neff. They are awesome. So Neff is also another reader, and it should play a little clip of said reading.
Yes, that's fine. The channel is intended for mature audiences. What the fuck do you think we are here? Okay, any hoozle.
Any hoozle indeed. Maj, do you prefer Majikral? Do you prefer like the whole name or? Aw, thank you. Thank you very kindly.
Majikral just cheered 50 bits.
M. Okay. Go by M. I'll do my best to remember. Also, before you head out, we should give M a shout out as well. M is also another prolific reader. Really, I've been enjoying their stream, though admittedly they are more of a face cam streamer than a VTuber like Neff or I. Chill vibes, very chill vibes. Are you still reading? I think it was Brandon Sanderson, I believe. Bear with me.
Best I know how. Look at them all line up there. Friends, comrades.
This war has brought us pain and suffering and loss. But it's also brought us together
as soldiers, allies, and friends. Incredible. I'm not familiar with that game, but it looks really cool. I like the uniforms. It has kind of a space feel to it. That looked really neat. So if you're not familiar with M, check out M's content. Give them a quick follow. You know, it's supposed to, when I do the shout out, it's supposed to like ping your your channel on Twitch. One more thing. Always something. Grab my sticky notes over here. Pencil, check. Something to write on? Check. Find out why. Because those are with Guru. Something Guru. Guru. Not tagging. As it should. Alright. We will figure that out after the stream and continue on with our reading. So we are now on to chapter 7, The Light of Knowledge. And if you aren't familiar, right, Fallen, one more thing to fix. If you're not familiar with my content or you're new here, hello, my name is Vexen Cat. I am a tiger librarian and I read classic literature, poetry, and occasionally play games. And right now, between chapters, or before I start this next chapter, I want to remind everyone to stretch. And yeah, make sure that you're staying hydrated, caffeinated if you need to, and that you're enjoying the story. So do whatever you need to settle in and enjoy my reading. Okay. Chapter 7. The Light of Knowledge. After what seemed an eternity to the little sufferer, he was able to walk once more, and from then on his recovery was rapid, so that in another month he was as strong and active as ever. During his convalescence, he had gone over in his mind many times the battle with the gorilla, and his first thought was to recover the wonderful little weapon which had transformed him from a hopelessly outclassed weakling to the superior of the mighty terror of the jungle. Also, he was anxious to return to the cabin and continue his investigations of its wondrous contents. So early one morning he set forth alone upon his quest. After a little search, he located the clean-picked bones of his late adversary. And close by, partly buried beneath the fallen leaves, he found the knife, now red with rust from its exposure to the dampness of the ground and from the dried blood of the gorilla. He did not like the change in his former bright and gleaming surface. But it was still a formidable weapon, and one which he had meant to use to his advantage whenever the opportunity presented itself. He had in mind that no more would he run from the wanton attacks of old Tublat. In another moment he was at the cabin, and after a short time he had again thrown the latch and entered. His first concern was to learn the mechanism of the lock, and this he did by examining it closely while the door was open, so that he could learn precisely what caused it to hold the door and by what means it released at his touch. He found that he could close and lock the door from within, and this he did so, that there would be no chance of his being molested while at his investigations. He commenced a systematic search of the cabin, but his attention was soon riveted by the books, which seemed to exert a strange and powerful influence over him. Same, bestie, same. So that he could scarce attend to aught else for the lure of the wondrous puzzle which their purpose presented to him. Among the other books were a primer, some child's readers, numerous picture books, a great dictionary, Is that what I think it is? arid, of land or a climate having little or no, so arid, okay, so I said it correctly. I wasn't aware that there was um, more than one definition for that word. I knew of the land or climate having little or no rain, too dry or barren to support vegetation, like an arid desert. Lacking in interest, excitement, or meaning. These are very different definitions. Interesting. But I guess dry or boring or waterless makes sense. Among the other books were a primer, some child's readers, numerous picture books, Arid, a great dictionary. All of these he examined, but the pictures caught his fancy most, though the strange little bugs which covered the pages were there where there were no pictures, excited his wonder and deepest thought. Squatting upon his haunches on the table top in the cabin his father had built, his smooth, brown, naked little body bent over the book which rested in his strong, slender hands, and his great shock of long black hair falling about his well-shaped head and bright, intelligent eyes. Tarzan of the Apes, little primitive man, presented a picture filled at once with pathos and with promise, an allegorical figure of the primordial groping through the black night of ignorance toward the light of learning. His little face was tense in study, for he had partially grasped, in a hazy, nebulous way, the rudiments of a thought which was destined to prove the key and the solution to the puzzling problem of the strange little bugs. In his hands was a primer, opened at a picture of a little ape similar to himself, but covered, except for hands and face, with strange colored fur. For such he thought the jacket and trousers to be. Beneath the picture were 3 little bugs. B-O-Y. And now he had discovered in the text upon the page that these 3 were repeated many times in the same sequence. Another fact he learned, that there were comparatively few individual bugs, but these were repeated many times, occasionally alone, but more often in company with others. Slowly he turned the pages, scanning the pictures and the text for a repetition of the combination B-O-Y. Presently he found it beneath a picture of another little ape and a strange animal which went upon 4 legs like the jackal and resembled him not a little. Beneath this picture the bugs appeared as A, B, O, Y, A, N, D, A, D, O, G. There they were, the 3 little bugs which always accompanied the little ape. And so he progressed, very, very slowly, for it was a hard and laborious task which he had set himself without knowing it. A task which might seem to you or me impossible. Learning to read without having the slightest knowledge of letters or written language, or the faintest idea that such things existed. He did not accomplish it in a day, or in a week, or in a month, or in a year, but slowly, very slowly, he learned after he had grasped the possibilities which lay in those little bugs, so that by the time he was 15, he knew the various combinations of letters which stood for every pictured figure in the little primer and in 1 or 2 of the picture books. Of the meaning and use of the articles and conjunctions, verbs and adverbs and pronouns, he had but the faintest and haziest conception. One day, when he was about 12, he found a number of lead pencils in a hitherto undiscovered drawer beneath the table, and in scratching upon the tabletop with one of them, he was delighted to discover the black line it left behind. the black line it left behind it. There we go. He worked so studiously with this new toy that the tabletop was soon a mess of scrawly loops and irregular lines, and his pencil point worn down to the wood. Then he took another pencil, but this time he had a definite object in view. He would attempt to reproduce some of the little bugs that scrambled over the pages of his books. It was a difficult task, for he held the pencil as one would grasp the hilt of a dagger, which does not add great to ease in writing nor to the legibility of the results. Oof. But he persevered for months, at such times as he was able to come to the cabin, until at last, by repeated experimenting, he found a position in which to hold the pencil that best permitted him to guide and control it, so that at last he could roughly reproduce any of the little bugs. Thus he made a beginning at writing. Copying the little bugs taught him another thing, their number, and though he could not count as we understand it yet, he had an idea of quantity, the base of his calculations being the number of fingers upon one of his hands. His search through the various books convinced him that he had discovered all the different kinds of bugs most often repeated in combination, and these he arranged in proper order with great ease because of the frequency with which he had perused the fascinating alphabet picture book. His education progressed, but his greatest finds were in the inexhaustible storehouse of the huge illustrated dictionary, for he learned more through the medium of pictures than text, even after he had grasped the significance of the bugs. When he discovered the arrangement of words in alphabetical order, he delighted in searching for and finding the combinations with which he was familiar, and the words which followed them, their definitions, led him still further into the mazes of erudition. By the time he was 17, he had learned to read the simple child's primer, and had fully realized the true and wonderful purpose of the little bugs. No longer did he feel shame for his hairless body or his human features, for now his reason told him that he was a different race from his wild and hairy companions. He was a MAN. They were APES. And the little apes which scurried through the forest top were MONKEYS. He knew, too, that the old Sabor was a LIONESS, and Hista a SNAKE, and Tantor an ELEPHANT, and so he learned to read. From then on, his progress was rapid. With the help of the great dictionary and the active intelligence of a healthy mind, endowed by inheritance with more than ordinary reasoning powers, he shrewdly guessed at much which he could not really understand, and more often than not his guesses were close to the mark of truth. There were many breaks in his education, caused by the migratory habits of his tribe, but even when removed from recourse to his books, his active brain continued to search out the mysteries of his fascinating avocation. Pieces of bark and flat leaves and even smooth stretches of bare earth provided him with copybooks whereon to scratch with the pointing of his hunting knife and the lessons he was learning. Nor did he neglect the sterner duties of life while following the bent of his inclination toward the solving of the mystery of his library. He practiced with his rope and played with his sharp knife, which he had learned to keep keen by whetting upon flat stones. The tribe had grown larger since Tarzan had come among them, for under the leadership of Kerchak they had been able to frighten the other tribes from their part of the jungle, so that they had plenty to eat and little or no loss from predatory incursions of neighbors. Hence, the younger males, as they became adult, found it more comfortable to take wives from their own tribe or if they captured one of another tribe to bring her back to Kerchak's band and live in amity with him rather than attempt to set up a new establishment of their own, or fight with the redoubtable Kerchak for supremacy at home. Occasionally, one more ferocious than his fellows would attempt this latter alternative. But none had yet but none had come yet who could wrest the palm of victory from the fierce and brutal ape. Tarzan held a peculiar position in the tribe. They seemed to consider him one of them, and yet in some way different. The older males either ignored him entirely or else hated him so vindictively that but for his wondrous agility and speed and the fierce protection of the huge Kala, he would have been dispatched at an early age. Tublat was his most consistent enemy, but it was through Tublat that, when he was about 13, the persecution of his enemies suddenly ceased, and he was left severely alone, except on the occasions when one of them ran amok in the throes of one of those strange, wild fits of insane rage which attacks the males of many of the fiercer jungle animals of the jungle. Then none was safe. On the day that Tarzan established his right to respect, the tribe was gathered about a small, natural amphitheater, which the jungle had left free from its entangling vines and creepers in a hollow amongst some low hills. The open space, was almost circular in shape. Upon every hand rose the mighty giants of the untouched forest, with the matted undergrowth banked so closely between the huge trunks that the only opening into the little level arena was through the upper branches of the trees. Here, safe from interruption, the tribe often gathered in the center of the amphitheater was one of those strange earthen drums which the anthropoids built for the queer rites, the sounds of which men have heard in the fastnesses of the jungle, but which none had ever witnessed. Many travelers have seen the drums of the great apes, and some have heard the sounds of their beating and the noise of the wild, weird revelry of these first lords of the jungle. But Tarzan, Lord Greystoke, is doubtless the only human being who ever joined in the fierce, mad, intoxicating revel of the dum-dum. The dum-dum. Oh, man. The only human being who had ever joined in the fierce, mad, intoxicating revel of the doom-doom. Yeah, it got a little giggle out of me too. I'm gonna put that in there. The doom. I might turn that into a clip later. I don't know. That's quite silly. Very silly. From this primitive function has arisen unquestionably all the forms and ceremonials of modern church and state. For through all the countless ages, back beyond the last uttermost ramparts of a dawning humanity, our fierce, hairy forebears danced out the rites of the doom-doom to the sound of their earthen drums, beneath the bright light of a tropical moon in the depth of a mighty jungle which stands unchanged today as it stood on that long forgotten night in the dim, unthinkable vistas of the long-dead past, where our first shaggy ancestor swung from a swaying bough and dropped lightly upon the soft turf of the first meeting place. On the day that Tarzan won his emancipation from the persecution that had followed him remorselessly for 12 of his 13 years of life, The tribe, now a full 100 strong, trooped silently through the lower terrace of the jungle trees and dropped noiselessly upon the floor of the amphitheater. The rites of the Doom Doom marked important events in the life of the tribe. A victory, the capture of a prisoner, the killing of some large, fierce denizen of the jungle, the death or ascension of a king, and were conducted with set ceremonialism. Today it was the killing of a giant ape, a member of another tribe, and as the people of Kerchak entered the arena, 2 mighty bulls might have been seen bearing the body of the vanquished between them. They laid their burden before the earthen drum, and then squatted there beside it as guards, while the other members of the community curled themselves in grassy nooks to sleep until the rising moon should give the signal for the commencement of their savage orgy. I beg your pardon? They laid their burden before the earthen drums and then squatted there beside it as guards. Read that again. Okay. They laid their burden before the earthen drum and then squatted there beside it as guards, while the other members of the community curled themselves in grassy nooks to sleep until the rising moon should give the signal for the commencement of their savage orgy. Yep, I read that right. It was just very strange. Very strange. Orgy? Question mark marker. Yeah. For hours, absolute quiet reigned. Bear with me. I'm. Better. For hours, absolute quiet reigned in the little clearing, except as it was broken by the discordant notes of brilliantly feathered parrots, or the screeching and twittering of the 1,000 jungle birds flitting ceaselessly amongst the vivid orchids and flamboyant blossoms which festooned the myriad moss-covered branches of the forest kings. There we go. At length, as darkness settled upon the jungle, open that over there. At length, as darkness settled among the jungle, the apes commenced to bestir themselves, and soon they formed a great circle about the earthen drum. The females and young squatted in a thin line at the outer periphery of the circle, while just in front of them ranged the adult males. Before the drum sat three old females, each armed with a knotted branch 15 or 18 inches in length. Slowly and softly, they began tapping upon the resounding surface of the drum as the first faint rays of the ascending moon silvered the encircling treetops. As the light in the amphitheater increased, the females augmented the frequency and force of their blows until presently a wild, rhythmic din pervaded the great jungle for miles in every direction. Huge, fierce brutes stopped in their hunting with up-pricked ears and raised heads to listen to the dull booming that betokened the doom-doom of the apes. Occasionally, one would raise his shrill scream or thunderous roar in answering challenge to the savage din of the anthropoids, but none came near to investigate or attack, for the great apes assembled in all the power of their numbers filled the breasts of their jungle neighbors with deep respect. As the din of the drum rose to almost deafening volume, Kerchak sprang into the open space between the squatting males and the drummers. Standing erect, he threw his head far back, and looking full into the eye of the rising moon, he beat upon his breast with his great hairy paws and emitted his fearful roaring shriek. Once, twice, thrice that terrifying cry rang out across the teeming solitude of that unspeakably quick, yet unthinkably dead world. Then, crouching, Kerchak slunk noiselessly around the open circle, veering far away from the dead body, lying before the altar drum. But as he passed, keeping his little, fierce, wicked red eyes upon the corpse, another male then sprang into the arena, and, repeating the horrid cries of his king, followed stealthily in his wake. Another and another followed in quick succession until the jungle reverberated with the now almost ceaseless notes of their bloodthirsty screams. It was the challenge and the hunt. When all the adult males had joined in the thin line of circling dancers, the attack commenced. Kerchak, seizing a huge club from the pile which lay at hand for the purpose, rushed furiously upon the dead ape, dealing the corpse a terrific blow, at the same time emitting the growls and snarls of combat. The din of the drum was now increased, as well as the frequency of the blows, and the warriors, as each approached the victim of the hunt and delivered his bludgeon blow, joined in the mad whirl of the death dance. Tarzan was one of the wild, leaping horde, his brown, sweat-streaked, muscular body glistening in the moonlight, shone supple and graceful among the uncouth, awkward, hairy brutes about him. None more craftily stealthy in the mimic hunt, none more ferocious than he in the wild ferocity of the attack, nor none who leaped so high into the air in the dance of death. As the noise and rapidity of the drum beats increased, the dancers apparently became intoxicated with the wild rhythm and the savage yells. Their leaps and bounds increased, their bared fangs dripped saliva, and their lips and breasts were decked with foam. For half an hour the weird dance went on until a sign from Kerchak. The noise of the drum ceased, the female drummers scampering hurriedly through the line of dancers toward the outer rim of squatting spectators. Then, as one man, the males rushed headlong upon the thing which their terrific blows had reduced to a mass of hairy pulp. Flesh seldom came to their jaws in satisfying quantities, so a fit finale to their wild revel was a taste of fresh-killed meat, and it was to the purpose of devouring their late enemy that they now turned their attention. Brutal. Great fangs sunk into the carcass, tearing away huge hunks, the mightiest of the apes obtaining the choicest morsels, while the weaker circled the outer edge of the fighting. Snarling, pack awaited their chance to dodge in and snatch a dropped titbit or filch a remaining bone before all was gone. Tarzan, more than the apes, craved and needed flesh. Descended from a race of meat-eaters, never in his life, he thought, had he once satisfied his appetite for animal food, and so now his agile little body wormed its way far into the mass of struggling, rending apes in an endeavor to obtain a share which his strength would have been unequal to the task of winning for him. At his side hung the hunting knife of his unknown father, in a sheath self-fashioned in a copy of one he had seen among the pictures of his treasure books. At last He reached the fast disappearing feast, and with his sharp knife slashed off a more generous portion than he had hoped for, an entire hairy forearm, where it protruded from beneath the feet of the mighty Kerchak, who was so busily engaged in perpetuating the royal prerogative of hogging that he failed to notice the act of lèse-majesté. I'm going to look up this word, but I don't think... yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to find that. Something dictionary.com. Lèse-majesté. Perhaps. Lèse-majesté, a crime such as treason committed against a sovereign power. Lèse-majesté. Interesting. So there should be a dash in that word. Pronunciation? What does that sound like? Lèse-majesté. Lèse-majesté. Well, now you know. Failed to note the act of lèse-majesté. All right, makes sense. So little Tarzan wiggled out from beneath the struggling mass, clutching his grisly prize close to his breast. Among those circling futilely the outskirts of the banqueters was old Toublat. He had been among the first at the feast, but had retreated with a goodly share to eat in quiet, and was now forcing his way back for more. Yeah, this is pretty brutal. So it was that he spied Tarzan as the boy emerged from the clawing, pushing throng with the hairy forearm hugged firmly to his body. Toublat's little, close-set, bloodshot pig eyes shot wicked gleams of hate as they fell upon the object of his loathing. In them, too, was greed for the toothsome dainty the boy carried. But Tarzan saw his arch-enemy as quickly, and divining what the great beast would do, he leaped nimbly away toward the women and children, hoping to hide himself among them. Toublat, however, was close upon his heels, so that he had no opportunity to seek a place of concealment, but saw that he would be put to it to escape at all. Swiftly he sped toward the surrounding trees, and with an agile bound gained a lower limb with one hand, and then, transferring his burden to his teeth, he climbed rapidly upward, closely followed by Toublat. Up he went to the waving pinnacle of a lofty monarch of the forest, where his heavy pursuer dared not follow him. There he perched, hurling taunts and insults at the raging, foaming beast 50 feet below him. And then Toublat went mad. With horrifying screams and roars he rushed to the ground among the females and young, sinking his great fangs into a dozen tiny necks and tearing great pieces from the backs and breasts of the females who fell into his clutches. In the brilliant moonlight, Tarzan witnessed the whole mad carnival of rage. He saw the females and the young scamper to the safety of the trees. Then the great bulls in the center of the arena felt the mighty fangs of their demented fellow. And with one accord they melted into the black shadows of the overhanging forest. There was but one in the amphitheater beside Tublat, a belated female running swiftly toward the tree where Tarzan perched, and close behind her came the awful Tublat. It was Kala, and as quickly as Tarzan saw that Tublat was gaining on her, he dropped with the rapidity of a falling stone from branch to branch toward his foster mother. Now she was beneath the overhanging limbs, and close above her crouched Tarzan, waiting the outcome of the race. She leaped into the air, grasping a low-hanging branch, but almost over the head of Tublat. So nearly had he distanced her. She should have been safe now, but there was a rending, tearing sound. The branch broke and precipitated hay full upon the head of Tublat, knocking him to the ground. Both were up in an instant, but as quick as they had been, Tarzan had been quicker, so that the infuriated bull found himself facing the man-child who stood between him and Kala. Nothing could have suited the fierce beast better, and with a roar of triumph he leaped upon the little Lord Greystoke. But his fangs never closed in the nut-brown flesh. A muscular hand shot out and grasped the hairy throat, and another plunged a keen hunting knife 12 times into the broad beast. Like lightning the blows fell, and only ceased when Tarzan felt the limp form crumple beneath him. As the body rolled to the ground, Tarzan of the Apes placed his foot upon the neck of his lifelong enemy, and raising his eyes to the full moon, threw back his fierce young head and voiced the wild and terrible cry of his people. One by one the tribe swung down from their arboreal retreats and formed a circle about Tarzan and his vanquished foe. When they had all come, Tarzan turned toward them. "I am Tarzan," he cried. "I am a great killer. Let all respect Tarzan of the Apes and Kala his mother. There be none among you as mighty as Tarzan. Let his enemies beware." Looking full into the wicked red eyes of Kerchak, the young Lord Greystoke beat upon his mighty breast and screamed out once more his shrill cry of defiance. Dun dun dun. Oh man, you guys. That was a heck of a chapter. Whew. We are in between chapters right now. I had planned on reading about 5 today, and at that point we are on 5, 6, 7. So we have about 2 more chapters to read today. But we're at a point where I need to do an ad break. Yes,
Drink water. Become moist.
Snack time!
Nom, nom.
Don't forget to stretch!
Big stretch. Very wise. Very, very wise. Yes, all of the things. I should just make it like a major care package and just do all together. As a friendly reminder between chapters, hydrate, caffeinate, grab a snack, stretch, do all the things that you need to do to be comfortable. I'm going to take a quick 3-minute bathroom break and get an ad out of the way. And then we should be unmolested by ad breaks for the rest of the stream. So, hold tight. I will be back as soon as I can. And let's see. Let's pull that up. Yep. Be right back. Be or me. we should be back here, I think. There we go. I still think this needs calibrating a little bit. Ba 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 ba. Maybe a little less. Somewhere in there, I think. Somewhere over the rainbow. Yeah, there we go. I think that'll work. So we return to Tarzan of the Apes, and we're going to be reading chapter 8. So, as a friendly reminder, hydrate, caffeinate, do whatever you need to relax and enjoy the story. And thank you for the welcome back, Lasada. I appreciate having you here. Let's see. Also, welcome in Manny, Higara. I'm trying to think of anyone else that I forgot to say welcome into. I still need to figure out why the guru. Twitch.guru is supposed to be tagging our lovely friends, but it is not in the chat, and I do not know why. Oh, probably because it needed to re-up the authorization. Because why not? Let that figure itself out. All right, we are on to chapter 8. The Treetop Hunter. The Treetop Hunter. Okay. It should work as intended now. I might need to test it again. Reading us our bed. Oh. I appreciate you reading us our bedtime stories. Aw. Thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying them. Chapter 8, The Treetop Hunter. The morning after the Doom, the tribe started slowly back through the trees toward the coast. The body of Tublat lay where it had fallen, for the people of Kerchak do not eat their own dead. Good. The march was but a leisurely search for food. Cabbage palm and gray plum, pisang and sintamine they found in abundance, with wild pineapple and occasionally small mammals, birds, eggs, reptiles, and insects. The nuts they cracked between their powerful jaws, or, if too hard, broke by pounding between stones. Once, old Sabor crossing their path sent them scurrying to the safety of the higher branches. For if she respected their number and their sharp fangs, they, on their part, held her cruel and mighty ferocity in equal esteem. Upon a low-hanging branch sat Tarzan, directly above the majestic, supple body as it forged silently through the thick jungle. He hurled a pineapple at the ancient enemy of his people. The great beast stopped, and turning, eyed the taunting figure above her. With an angry lash of her tail, she bared her yellow fangs, curling her great lips in a hideous snarl that wrinkled her bristling snout in serrated ridges, and closed her wicked eyes to two narrow slits of rage and hatred. Serried? I said that wrong. Standing close together, serried. So similar to serrated, but not exactly. Serried. Wrinkled her bristling snout in serried ridges, and closed her wicked eyes to two narrow slits of rage and hatred. With back-laid ears she looked straight into the eyes of Tarzan of the Apes, and sounded her fierce, shrill challenge. Grab that. There we go. And from the safety of his overhanging limb, the ape child sent back the fearsome answer of his kind. For a moment the two eyed each other in silence, and then the great cat turned into the jungle, which swallowed her as the ocean engulfs a tossed pebble. But into the mind of Tarzan a great plan sprang. He had killed the fierce to blot, so was he not therefore a mighty fighter? Now would he track down the crafty Sabor and slay her likewise? He would be a mighty hunter also. At the bottom of his little English heart beat the great desire to cover his nakedness with clothes, for he had learned from his picture books that all men were so covered, while monkeys and apes and every other living thing went naked. Clothes, therefore, must be truly a badge of greatness, the insignia of the superiority of man over all other animals, for surely there could be no other reason for wearing the hideous things. Many moons ago, when he had been much smaller, he had desired the skin of Sabor, the lioness, or Numa, the lion, or Sheeta, the leopard, to cover his hairless body, that he might no longer resemble hideous Hista, the snake. But now he was proud of his sleek skin, for it betokened his descent from a mighty race. And the conflicting desires to go naked in prideful proof of his ancestry, or to conform to the customs of his own kind, and wear hideous and uncomfortable apparel, found first one and then the other in the ascendancy. As the tribe continued their slow way through the forest after the passing of Sabor, Tarzan's head was filled with his great scheme for slaying his enemy, and for many days thereafter he thought of little else. On this day, however, he presently had other and more immediate interests to attract his attention. For of a sudden it became as midnight. The noises of the jungle ceased. The trees stood motionless, as though in paralyzed expectancy of some great and imminent danger. All nature waited, but not for long.
I am not
Welcome
an egg,
in, I
just
am not an
followed.
egg. An actual reading stream followed. Yes. In fact, there are a number of readers that I associate with that you should check out. I should really think about making a librarian team. One of these days, I'll think about it. In fact, I'll go ahead and ping them now and give, since I think I fixed the Twitch Guru shoutouts. Neff, Darath the Lorekeeper. There we go. It should ping him now, so it'll be easier to find him.
Then he got just a hair's distance from her, smiling as
It
there
did
was no
not.
space remaining. So she inched forward and stubbornly touched her nose to his lips.
You are quite welcome.
I'm so to his
Why
lips?
it doesn't
Well,
actually
that
ping
ain't
him,
even in
I
the
don't
fucking.
know.
Let me try that one again.
Apparently, I'm gonna have to go back and reset Twitch Guru entirely. Oh well. Darn. Neff Darath the Lorekeeper, though, is a good egg. Great reader. faintly. From a distance came a low, sad moaning. Nearer and nearer it approached, mounting loaded and louder in volume. Interesting. The great trees bent in unison, as though pressed earthward by a mighty hand. Further and further toward the ground they inclined, and still there was no sound save the deep and awesome moaning of the wind. Then suddenly the jungle giants whipped back, lashing their mighty tops in angry and deafening protest. A vivid and blinding light flashed from the whirling, inky clouds above. The deep cannonade of roaring thunder belched forth its fearsome challenge. The deluge came. All hell broke loose upon the jungle. The tribe huddled, shivering from the cold rain, at the bases of great trees. The lightning darting and flashing through the blackness showed wildly waving branches, whipping streamers and bending trunks. Now and again some ancient patriarch of the woods, rent by a flashing bolt, would crash in 1,000 pieces among the surrounding trees, carrying down numberless branches and many smaller neighbors, to add to the tangled confusion of the tropical jungle. Branches great and small, torn away by the ferocity of the tornado, hurtled through the wildly waving verdure, carrying death and destruction to countless unhappy denizens of the thickly peopled world below. For hours, the fury of the storm continued without surcease, and still the tribe huddled close in shivering fear, in constant danger from falling trunks and branches, and paralyzed by the vivid flashing of lightning and the bellowing of thunder. They crouched in pitiful misery until the storm passed. The end was as sudden as the beginning. The wind ceased. The sun shone forth. Nature smiled once more. The dripping leaves and branches and the moist petals of gorgeous flowers glistened in the splendor of the returning day. And so, as nature forgot, her children forgot also. Busy life went on as it had been before the darkness and the fright. But to Tarzan, a dawning light had come to explain the mystery of clothes. How snug he would have been beneath the heavy coat of Sabor, and so was added a further incentive to the adventure. For several months the tribe hovered near the beach where stood Tarzan's cabin, and his studies took up the greater portion of his time. But always when journeying through the forest he kept his rope in readiness, and many were the smaller animals that fell into the snare of the quick-thrown noose. Once it fell upon the short neck of Horta the boar, and his mad lunge for freedom toppled Tarzan from the overhanging limb where he had lain in wait, and from whence he had launched his sinuous coil. The mighty tusker turned at the sound of his falling body, and seeing only the easy prey of a young ape, he lowered his head and charged madly at the surprised youth. Tarzan, happily, was uninjured by the fall, alighting cat-like upon all fours, far outspread, to take up the shock. He was on his feet in an instant, and leaping with the agility of the Moor-Key he was. He gained the safety of a low limb as Horta the boar rushed futilely beneath. Thus it was that Tarzan learned by experience the limitations as well as the possibilities of this strange weapon. He lost a long rope on this occasion, but he knew that had it been Sabor who had thus dragged him from his perch, the outcome might have been very different, for he would have lost his life, doubtless, into the bargain. It took him many days to braid a new rope, But when finally it was done, he went forth purposely to hunt and lie in wait among the dense foliage of a great branch right above a well-beaten trail that led to water. Several small animals passed unharmed beneath him. He did not want such insignificant game. It would take a strong animal to test the efficacy of his new scheme. At last, she whom Tarzan sought, with lithe sinews rolling beneath shimmering hide, fat and glossy came Sabor, the lioness. Her great padded feet fell soft and noiseless on the narrow trail. Her head was high in ever-alert attention. Her long tail moved slowly in sinuous and graceful undulations. Nearer and nearer she came to where Tarzan of the Apes crouched upon his limb, the coils of his long rope poised ready in his hand. Like a thing of bronze, motionless as death, sat Tarzan. Sabor passed beneath. One stride beyond she took, a second, a third, and then the silent coil shot out above her. For an instant the spreading noose hung above her head like a great snake, and then as she looked upward to detect the origin of the swishing sound of the rope, it settled about her neck. With a quick jerk, Tarzan snapped the noose tight about the glossy throat, and then he dropped the rope and clung to his support with both hands. Sabor was trapped. With a bound, the startled beast turned into the jungle, but Tarzan was not to lose another rope through the same cause as the first. He had learned from experience. The lioness had taken but half her second bound when she felt the rope tighten about her neck. Her body turned completely over in the air, and she fell with a heavy crash upon her back. Tarzan had fastened the end of the rope securely to the trunk of the great tree on which he sat. Thus far his plan had worked to perfection, but when he grasped the rope, bracing himself behind a crotch of two mighty branches, he found that dragging the mighty, struggling, clawing, biting, screaming mass of iron-muscled fury up to the tree and hanging her was a very different proposition. The weight of old Sabor was immense, and when she braced her huge paws, nothing less than Tantor, the elephant himself, could have budged her. The lioness was now back in the path where she could see the author of the indignity which had been placed upon her. Screaming with rage, she suddenly charged, leaping high into the air toward Tarzan, but when her huge body struck the limb on which Tarzan had been, Tarzan was no longer there. Instead, he perched lightly upon a smaller branch 20 feet above the raging captive. For a moment, Sabor hung half across the branch while Tarzan mocked and hurled twigs and branches at her unprotected face. Presently, the beast dropped to the earth again, and Tarzan came quickly to seize the rope, but Sabor had now found that it was only a slender cord that held her, and grasping it in her huge jaws, severed it before Tarzan could tighten the strangling noose a second time. Tarzan was much hurt. His well-laid plan had come to naught. Oh. Welcome in, Alan and Bill the Duck. Thank you for the raid. Hey, yo! I am not an egg. Alan and Bill the Duck is another reading streamer. You should check out their content. Admittedly, Bill is a little mysterious. Bill the Duck is a little dangerous. So be careful. You never know what he'll talk you into. Isn't that right, Alan? Where were we? Tarzan was much hurt. His well-laid plans had come to naught, so he sat there, screaming at the roaring creature beneath him and making mocking grimaces at it. Sabor paced back and forth beneath the tree for hours. 4 times she crouched and sprang at the dancing sprite above her, but as well have clutched at the elusive wind that murmured through the treetops. At last, Tarzan, tired of the sport, and with a parting roar of challenge and a well-aimed ripe fruit that spread softly and sticky over the snarling face of his enemy, he swung rapidly through the trees, 100 feet above the ground, and in a short time was among the members of his tribe. Here he recounted the details of his adventure, with swelling chest and so considerable swagger that he quite impressed even his bitterest enemies, while Kala fairly danced for joy and pride. Okay. Yes, Alan and Bill the Duck, I am doing quite well. Thank you. I hope you and the duck are doing quite well. This should be... What does this look like? That is what it's supposed to do, but it is not doing it. Copy. Copy, yes, yes. And go in here, go to alerts. Shout out clips. Edit. Aw, thank you. It looks like I need to fix that too. Where's Pets? Pets? This one needs to come up a little bit. I swear every time I do this, I have to do something. It's like, I don't know. More complicated than it needs to be. Okay, properties, this one. Try that. And this is a good opportunity. Alan, I'm going to go ahead and give you a shout out too. I need to test Guru. I would do anyway, but your timing couldn't have been better. Of course. If it does it correctly, it should actually post a message in the chat.
Number 1. The evil attack, the good defend. Number 2.
Or not.
The evil punish, the good forgive. Number 3.
Bless.
The evil hurt, the good help. Number 4. The evil take, the good give. Number 5. The evil hate, the good
Yeah,
love.
it's being cranky. I don't know why it's being so cranky. Thank you, Valis. I think whatever they've done has... Aww, Small Town Writer D, thank you. Excellent. Well, welcome in, Small Town Writer D. Do you prefer D? We can call you D. Yeah, thank you so much, Valis. Fun times. Okay, right. Let's see. What time is it right now? It is 8 p.m. EDT. Let's go ahead and shoot for one more, which would be our 5th chapter today. And then we will go ahead and wrap up for today. So however long this takes, and then we'll find someone. That way we, as a lovely listening community, will not have to worry about finding or having to sit through another ad. That's the goal, the dream, the prayer. So hopefully this next chapter isn't quite too long. So we are on to chapter 9. Man and man. I wonder what's going to happen. Tarzan of the Apes lived on in his wild jungle existence with little change for several years, only that he grew stronger and wiser and learned from his books more and more of the strange worlds which lay somewhere outside his primeval forest. To him, life was never monotonous or stale. Fair. There was always Passaw the fish, to be caught in the many streams and the little lakes, and Sabor with her ferocious cousins to keep one ever on the alert and give zest to every instant that one spent upon the ground. Often they hunted him, and more often he hunted them, but though they never quite reached him with those cruel, sharp claws of theirs, yet there were times when one could scarce have passed a thick leaf between their talons and his smooth hide. Quick was Sabor the lioness, and quick were Numa and Sheeta, but Tarzan of the Apes was lightning. With Tantor the elephant he made friends. How? Ask me not. But this is known to the denizens of the jungle, that on many moonlit nights Tarzan of the Apes and Tantor the elephant walked together. And where the way was clear, Tarzan rode, perched high upon Tantor's mighty back. All else of the jungle were his enemies, except his own tribe, among whom he now had many friends. Many days during these years he spent in the cabin of his father, where still lay untouched the bones of his parents and the little skeleton of Kala's baby. At 18, he read fluently and understood nearly all he read in the many and varied volumes on the shelves. Also, could he write with printed letters rapidly and plainly, but script he had not mastered. For though there were several copybooks among his treasure, there was so little written English in the cabin that he saw no use for bothering with this other form of writing, though he could read it laboriously. Thus, at 18, we find him an English lordling, who could speak no English, and yet who could read and write his native language. Never had he seen a human being other than himself, for the little area traversed by his tribe was watered by no great river to bring down the savage natives of the interior. High hills shut it off on 3 sides, the ocean on the 4th. It was alive with lions and leopards and poisonous snakes. Its untouched mazes of matted jungle had as yet invited no hardy prisoner from the human beasts beyond its frontier. But as Tarzan of the Apes sat one day in the cabin of his father, delving into the mysteries of a new book, the ancient security of his jungle was broken forever. At the far eastern confine, a strange cavalcade, strung in single file over the brow of a low hill. In advance were 50 black warriors armed with what? Why did it matter? Whatever. In advance were 50 warriors armed with slender wooden spears with ends hard baked over slow fires, and long bows and poisoned arrows. On their backs were oval shields, in their noses huge rings, while from the kinky wool of their heads protruded tufts of gay feathers. I would just like to remind everyone that this book was written in 1914, and I always get caught off guard by some of the phrasing. There's a lot of antiquated terms. It's over 100 years old. I am so sorry that some of the language in these books is just no longer appropriate, and I would never condone the use of, nor do I choose to use any of the phrasing or language in any sort of modern day context. Oof. Just oof. Across their foreheads were tattooed 3 parallel lines of color, and on each breast 3 concentric circles. Their yellow teeth were filed to sharp points, and their great protruding lips added still further to the low and oh my god. Oh, it's just making me nauseous. And their great protruding lips added still further to the low and bestial brutishness of their appearance. Yeah, Lovecraft was bad too. As good as the science was in the science fiction, yeah. Following them were several hundred women and children, the former bearing upon their heads great burdens of cooking pots, household utensils, and ivory. In the rear were 100 warriors, similar in all respects to the advance guard, that they more greatly feared an attack from the rear than whatever unknown enemies lurked in their advance was evidenced by the formation of the column. And such was the fact, for they were fleeing from the white man's soldiers who had so harassed them for rubber and ivory that they had turned upon their conquerors one day and massacred an officer and a small detachment of his troops. For many days they had gorged themselves on the meat. Okay. For many days they had gorged themselves on meat, but eventually a stronger body of troops had come and fallen upon their village by night to revenge the death of their comrades. That night the soldiers of the white man had
Drink
meat
water.
aplenty.
Become
Yep, thippy thips. Thippy thips. Excellent distraction, because this is... Ooh. Almost tempted to start drinking alcohol. This is so bad. That night the soldiers of the white man had meat aplenty, and this little remnant of a once powerful tribe had slunk off into the gloomy jungle toward the unknown and freedom. But what meant freedom and the pursuit of happiness to these savage... We need Phil Collins. Yeah, accurate. But what meant freedom and the pursuit of happiness to these savages meant consternation and death to many of the wild denizens of their new home. For 3 days the little cavalcade marched slowly through the heart of this unknown and untracked forest, until finally, early in the 4th day, they came upon a little spot near the banks of a river, which seemed less thickly overgrown than any ground they had yet encountered. Here they set to work to build a new village, and in a month a great clearing had been made. Huts and palisades erected, plantains, yams, and maize planted, and they had taken up their old life in their new home. Here there were no white men, no soldiers, nor any rubber or ivory to be gathered for cruel and thankless taskmasters. Several moons passed by ere they ventured far into the territory surrounding their new village. Several had already fallen prey to old Sabor, and because the jungle was so infested with these fierce and bloodthirsty cats, and with lions and leopards and bears, oh my! And with lions and leopards, the warriors hesitated to trust themselves for the safety of their far from the safety of their palisades. But one day, Kulonga, a son of the old king Mbonga, wandered far into the dense mazes to the west. Warily he stepped, his slender lance ever ready, his long oval shield firm grasped in his left hand, close to his sleek body. At his back his bow, and in the quiver upon his shield many slim, straight arrows, well smeared with the thick, dark, tarry substance that rendered deadly their tiniest needle prick. Okay. Night found Kulonga far from the palisades of his father's village, but still headed westward, and climbing into the fork of a great tree, he fashioned a rude platform and curled himself for sleep. 3 miles to the west of him slept the tribe of Kerchak. Early the next morning the apes were astir, moving through the jungle in search of food. Tarzan, as was his custom, prosecuted his search in the direction of the cabin, so that by leisurely hunting on the way his stomach was filled by the time he reached the beach. The apes scattered by ones and twos and threes in all directions, but ever within sound of a signal of alarm. Kala had moved slowly along an elephant track toward the east, and was busily engaged in turning over rotted limbs and logs in search of succulent bugs and fungi. Esculent, I think. I must be saying that correctly. Esculent. Fit to be eaten or edible. The more you know. Esculent. Word. There we go. I consulted the dictionary. Escabits. Esculent bugs and fungi. When the faintest shadow of a strange noise brought her to startled attention, for 50 yards before her the trail was straight, and down this leafy tunnel she saw the stealthy advancing figure of a strange and fearful creature. It was Kulonga. Kala did not wait to see more, but turning, moved rapidly back along the trail. She did not run, but, after the manner of her kind when not aroused, sought rather to avoid than to escape. Close after her came Kulonga. Here was meat. He could make a killing and feast well this day. On he hurried, his spear poised for the throw. At a turning of the trail he came in sight of her, again upon another straight stretch. His spear hand went far back, the muscles rolled, lightning-like beneath the sleek hide. Out shot the arm, and the spear sped toward Kala. A poor cast. It but grazed her side. With a cry of rage and pain, the she-ape turned upon her tormentor. In an instant the trees were crashing beneath the weight of her hurrying fellows, swinging rapidly toward the scene of trouble in answer to Kala's scream. As she charged, Kulonga unslung his bow and fitted an arrow with almost unthinkable quickness. Drawing the shaft far back, he drove the poisoned missile straight into the heart of the great anthropoid. With a horrid scream, Kala plunged forward upon her face before the astonished members of her tribe. Roaring and shrieking, the apes dashed toward Kulonga. But that wary savage was fleeing down the trail like a frightened antelope. He knew something of the ferocity of these wild, hairy men, and his one desire was to put as many miles between himself and them as he possibly could. They followed him, racing through the trees for a long distance, but finally, one by one they abandoned the chase and returned to the scene of the tragedy. None of them had ever seen a man before other than Tarzan, and so they wondered vaguely what strange manner of creature it might be that had invaded their jungle. On the far beach by the little cabin, Tarzan heard the faint echoes of the conflict, and knowing that something was seriously amiss among the tribe, he hastened rapidly toward the direction of the sound. When he arrived, he found the entire tribe gathered, jabbering about the dead body of his slain mother. Tarzan's grief and anger were unbounded. He roared out his hideous challenge time and again. He beat upon his great chest with clenched fists, and then he fell upon the body of Kala and sobbed out the pitiful sorrowing of his lonely heart. To lose the only creature in all one's world who ever had manifested love and affection for one is a great bereavement indeed. What though Kala was a fierce and hideous ape, to Tarzan she had been kind, she had been beautiful. Upon her he had lavished, unknown to himself, all the reverence and respect and love that a normal English boy feels for his own mother. He had never known another, and so to Kala was given, though mutely, all that would have belonged to the fair and lovely Lady Alice had she lived. After the first outburst of grief, Tarzan controlled himself, and questioning the members of the tribe who had witnessed the killing of Kala, learned all that their meager vocabulary could vouchsafe him. It was enough, however, for his needs. It told him of a strange hairless ape with feathers growing upon its head, who launched death from a slender branch and then ran with the fleetness of Bara, the deer, and toward the rising run. Tarzan waited no longer, but leaping into the branches of the trees, sped rapidly through the forest. He knew the windings of the elephant trail along which Kala's murderer had flown, and so he cut straight through the jungle to intercept the warrior who had evidently following the tortuous detours of the trail. At his side was the hunting knife of his unknown sire, and across his shoulders the coils of his own long rope. In an hour he struck the trail again, and coming to earth examined the soil minutely. In the soft mud on the bank of a tiny rivulet he found footprints such as he alone in all the jungle had ever made, and much larger than his. His heart beat fast. Could it be that he was trailing a man? One of his own race? There were two sets of imprints pointing in opposite directions, so his quarry had already passed on his return along the trail. He examined the newer spoor, a tiny particle of earth toppled from the outer edge of one of the footprints to the bottom of its shallow depression. Ah! The trail was very fresh. His prey must have but scarcely passed. Tarzan swung himself to the trees once more, and with swift noiselessness sped along high above the trail. He had covered barely a mile when he came upon the warrior standing in a little open space. In his hand was his slender bow, to which he had fitted one of his death-dealing arrows. Opposite him, across the little clearing, stood Horta, the boar, with lowered head and foam-flecked tusks, ready to charge. Tarzan looked with wonder upon the strange creature beneath him, so like him in form and yet so different in face and color. I am not reading that. His books had betrayed the man, but how different had been the dull, dead print to this sleek and hideous thing of... Oh my God, this is so hard. The dull, dead print to this sleek and hideous thing of ebony pulsing with life. As the man stood there with taut, drawn bow, Tarzan recognized in him not so much the man as the archer of his picture book. A stands for archer. How wonderful! Tarzan almost betrayed his presence in the deep excitement of his discovery, but things were commencing to happen below him. The sinewy arm had drawn the shaft far back. Horta the boar was charging, and then the man released the little poisoned arrow, and Tarzan saw it fly with the quickness of thought and lodge in the bristling neck of the boar. Scarcely had the shaft left his bow ere Kulonga had fitted another to it, but Horta the boar was upon him so quickly that he had no time to discharge it. With a bound, the man leaped entirely over the rushing beast, and turning with incredible swiftness, planted a second arrow in Horta's back. Then Kulonga sprang into a nearby tree. Horta wheeled to charge his enemy once more. A dozen steps he took. Then he staggered and fell upon his side. For a moment his muscles stiffened and relaxed convulsively. Then he lay still. Kulonga came down from his tree. With the knife that hung at his side, he cut several large pieces from the boar's body, and in the center of the trail he built a fire, cooking and eating as much as he wanted. The rest he left where it had fallen. Tarzan was an interested spectator. His desire to kill burned fiercely in his wild breast, but his desire to learn was even greater. He would follow this savage creature for a while and know from whence he came. He could kill him at his leisure later when the bow and deadly arrows were laid aside. When Kulonga had finished his repast and disappeared beyond a near turning of the path, Tarzan dropped quietly to the ground. With his knife he severed many strips of meat from Horta's carcass, but he did not cook them. He had seen fire, but only when Ara, the lightning, had destroyed some great tree. That any creature of the jungle could produce the red and yellow fangs, which devoured wood and left nothing but fine dust, surprised Tarzan greatly. And why the warrior had ruined his delicious repast by plunging it into the blighting heat was quite beyond him. Possibly Ara was a friend with whom the archer was sharing his food. But, be that as it may, Tarzan would not ruin good meat in any such foolish manner, so he gobbled down a great quantity of the raw flesh, burying the balance of the carcass beside the trail where he could find it upon his return. And then Lord Greystoke wiped his greasy fingers upon his naked thighs, and took up the trail of Kulonga, the son of Mabonga, the king, while in far-off London another Lord Greystoke, the younger brother of the real Lord Greystoke's father, sent back his chops to the club's chef because they were underdone. And when he had finished his repast, he dipped his finger ends in a silver bowl of scented water and dried them upon a piece of snowy damask. Two people in two different worlds, for sure. All day Tarzan followed Kulonga, hovering above him in the trees like some malign? I mean, it'd be a malignant, but malign? I don't know how I would say that, actually. It's one of those, I know what it means. You're not wrong, Carmelo. Like, he's eaten raw meat and nuts and fruits in his whole life, so his digestive biome would be dramatically different than any... Yeah. Malignant. Like a malignant tumor is an example of what I mean. To malign is to like, how would I describe it? So to speak harmful truths, to speak evil of, to vilify, abuse, revile, disparage, calumniate. Oh man, that's a great word. Yeah, malign. It just looks weird. Meat. Yes, to malign. All day Tarzan followed Kulonga, hovering above him in the trees like some malign spirit. Sorry. Twice more he saw him hurl his arrows of destruction. once at Dango the hyena, and again at Manu the monkey. In each instance, the animal died almost instantly, for Kulonga's poison was very fresh and very deadly. Tarzan thought much on this wondrous method of slaying as he swung slowly along at a safe distance behind his quarry. He knew that alone the tiny prick of the arrow could not so quickly dispatch these wild things of the jungle, who were often torn and scratched and gored in a frightful manner as they fought with their jungle neighbors, yet as often recovered as not. No, there was something mysterious connected with these tiny slivers of wood, which could not bring death by tiny slivers of wood, which could bring death by a mere scratch. He must look into the matter. That night Kulonga slept in the crotch of a mighty tree, and far above him crouched Tarzan of the Apes. When Kulonga awoke, he found that his bow and arrows had disappeared. The warrior was furious and frightened, but more frightened than furious. He searched the ground below the tree, and he searched the tree above the ground, but there was no sign of either bow or arrows or of the nocturnal marauder. Kulonga was panic-stricken. His spear he had hurled at Kala and had not recovered, and now that his bow and arrows were gone, he was defenseless except for a single knife. His only hope lay... Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi! His only hope lay in reaching the village of Mbonga as quickly as his legs would carry him. He was not far from home, he was certain, so he took to the trail at a rapid trot. From a great mass of impenetrable foliage, a few yards away emerged Tarzan of the Apes to swing quietly in his wake. Kulonga's bow and arrows were securely tied high in the top of a giant tree, from which a patch of bark had been removed by a sharp knife near to the ground, and a branch half cut through and left hanging about 50 feet higher up. Thus Tarzan blazed the forest trails and marked his caches. As Kulonga continued his journey, Tarzan closed up on him until he traveled almost over the man's head. His rope he now held coiled in his right hand. He was almost ready for the kill. The moment was delayed only because Tarzan was anxious to ascertain the warrior's destination, and presently he was rewarded, for they came suddenly in view of a great clearing, at one end of which lay many strange lairs. Tarzan was directly over Kulonga as he made the discovery. The forest ended abruptly, and beyond lay 200 yards of planted fields between the jungle and the village. Tarzan must act quickly, or his prey would be gone, but Tarzan's life training left so little space between decision and action when an emergency confronted him that there was not even room for the shadow of thought between. So it was that as Kulonga emerged from the shadow of the jungle, a slender coil of rope sped sinuously above him, above the lowest branch of a mighty tree, directly upon the edge of the fields of Mbonga. And ere the king's son had taken half a dozen steps into the clearing, a quick noose tightened about his neck. So quickly did Tarzan of the Apes drag back his prey that Kulonga's cry of alarm was throttled in his windpipe. Hand over hand, Tarzan drew the struggling man until he had him hanging by his neck in midair. Then Tarzan climbed to a larger branch, drawing the still threshing victim well up into the sheltering verdure of the tree. Whoa. That is indeed cray. Here he fastened the rope securely to a stout branch and then, descending, plunged his hunting knife into Kulonga's heart. Kala was avenged. Tarzan examined the man minutely. Never had he seen another human being. The knife with which its sheath, the knife with its sheath and belt caught his eye. He appropriated them. A copper anklet also took his fancy, and this he transferred to his own leg. He examined and admired the tattooing on the forehead and breast. He marveled at the sharp-filed teeth. He investigated and appropriated the feathered headdress, and then he prepared to get down to business. No. Oh. Yikes. Okay. I need a second. That is too brutal. Okay. And then he prepared to get down to business. For Tarzan of the Apes was hungry, and here was meat. Meat of the kill which jungle ethics permitted him to eat. How we may judge him, by what standards, this ape man with the heart and head and body of an English gentleman, and the training of a wild beast. To Blot, whom he had hated and who had hated him, he had killed in fair fight, and yet never had the thought of eating to Blot's flesh entered his head. It would have been as revolting to him as is cannibalism to us. But who was Kulonga that he might not be eaten as fairly as Horta the boar or Bara the deer? Was he not simply another of the countless wild things of the jungle who preyed upon one another to satisfy the cravings of hunger? Of a sudden, a strange doubt stayed his hand. Had not his books taught him that he was a man? And was not the archer a man also? Did men eat men? Alas, he did not know. Why then this hesitancy? Oh, thank God. Once more he essayed the effort, but of a sudden a qualm of nausea overwhelmed him. He did not understand. Oh, thank goodness. All he knew was that he could not eat the flesh of this man, and thus hereditary instinct, ages old, usurped the functions of his untaught mind and saved him from transgressing a worldwide law of whose very existence he was ignorant. Quickly he lowered Kulonga's body to the ground, removed the noose, and took to the trees again. That was a whole lot. Whew. That was a lot. Yeah, I would say that's a holy shit moment. I really thought, yeah, I don't know. Jungle eat jungle, I guess. Whew, that was intense. Yeah, here we are. That was wild. Thank you for the pats, Jules. I needed that. That was too much.
Drink water. Become moist.
Okay. So we read 5 chapters today. And there's a few more minutes before an ad break is necessary. I need a minute to kind of process what just happened. That was a lot. From the brutal murder of his mother. Here, I'll just put the cover back up there. From the harm, like, so Kulonga was just after eating, he was hungry, killed his mother, Tarzan's, adoptive mother, was chased out of their forest by his, fellow apes, and I don't know, there was so much to process, none of which was kind or easy or, yeah. Why are their teeth filed into points? Did they themselves eat the regiment that they were working for before? There's so many questions, and none of it I think I need to know the answer to. But I think we need to find somebody to go right into. There was a lot to process with that story, and I think it's going to get weirder potentially with the next reading. This Friday, I will be continuing where I left off with the Chance of Sonar. So that'll be the second part. I believe we're still in the. We finished the fortress, all of part two. The Abbey, where we started out, the yellow and red zone. I have to go back and find. There's a couple of words that I don't have the translations for. I need to get confirmed. I'll have to figure that out. And then we're on to the third level, which I don't know what the name of it is. There's too many characters yet to determine what anything means, just that the warriors are not welcome there from the forest. So, or from the forest. I got forest on the brain. So let's find out who is reading. What was their name? Egg, I think. I am not an egg. Let me see if there's anybody you haven't seen before, because I know quite a few readers. Let's see who's in the category first, and then might be able to find someone. Okay, in the same category, who do we have? So Neff Darath, the lore keeper, is reading and has been for the last 50 minutes. We could go visit Neff. It looks like somebody else's, the book Twitch, Lao, something, reading fun, Aqua Lata de Valentine, that's a name. Can Renko be a paragon of women? Ranma, one half fanfic. Phoenix. we could go rate somebody with a that's reading Ranma fanfiction. That is incredible. Also, positive news, while I'm thinking about it, I finally had an answer to my question from before. Where is it? So Neff, the fellow reader whom I adore, so kindly found me, where is it? They had kindly found additional information about being a reader, being a booktuber. Okay, so Rafiki reads. So it's a very gray subject about what is allowed and what is not allowed to be read. I myself have mostly been reading classic literature, which falls under the criteria of public domain. Depending on which country you're in, what constitutes as public domain differs. And thus far, I think everything that I've read has been very safely public domain because it's like 100 years old. Let's see here. So there is an intellectual property lawyer that answered the question, can I stream myself reading a book on YouTube or Twitch? So there was a couple of lawyers that they didn't really dicker. They both agreed to be on the safe side, read from books that are under public domain. And otherwise you could be infringing on writer's copyright. But the other lawyer said that there is no copyright infringement for reading books on YouTube or Twitch, and the stream, in fact, is a new creation because you are reading the content. I am not taking credit for the book or the story they're in. I am not copying the book. I am creating a new performance. So under the US code, let me grab that. this seems useful for anyone else that might be here. I will stay hydrated, thank you. So under the US Code, which is what I am subject to as an American citizen, the subject matter of copyright as specified by section, here, let me put that up for you guys to be able to read. So, the subject matter of copyright as specified by section 102, which is what we're reading here, includes compilations and derivative works, but protection for a work employing pre-existing material in which copyright subsists does not extend to any part of the work in which such material is being used unlawfully. I am using it for its intended purpose. I'm reading it aloud. Derivative work extends only to the material contributed by the author of such work. So the copyright of such work is independent of and does not affect or enlarge the scope, duration, ownership, or subsistence of any copyright protection. I am not stealing the book. I am not saying that the book was written by me. I am not arbitrating, like saying that the book was written by someone else. I'm very, very clearly saying this book, Tarzan of the Apes, is written by Edgar Rice Burroughs. So I'm pretty confident under this ruling and under this gray, albeit in interpretation of the law, reading streams, book streams are safe. To be extra safe, if you choose to read public domain, it will never come back to bite you in the tuchus. But I feel a lot more confident in being able to read more modern texts. Namely, I've been given a whole assortment of Warhammer books to read, and also a number of other more modern works that I've always found great joy in. Authors such as Tamora Pierce, right, for like young author content. I would say like Brandon Sanderson. Neff reads a lot of Brandon Sanderson. There are a number of great authors whom I enjoy. And I would love to be able to share my enjoyment of those stories with you all. But anyway, I have rambled on about the subject of which has been eluding me for quite some time, and I'm excited to say I feel very confident and safe in reading more modern literature as long as I am properly attributing it to the said author and in no part making any changes to the content. So let's see, who am I following that is, let's see, Artstream, Warframe, Just Chatting, Fantasy, Final Fantasy 14. Carol is having a Cindy Lee fan club meeting. Black Hazard playing Once Human. There's a lot of gamers. Warhammer. Halbernacht is doing a painting stream. That would be kind of cool. Taste of Magic is another reading streamer. They're doing King of Crabs currently. Oh man, that would be funny. Lady Edgy Fox is doing Fortnite, another reading streamer. Porcelain Maid is doing building chat a new house with hand cam. That would be funny. Fallout 4. What is your favorite kind of, what are you playing? Axiom Verge. Oh, that would be cute. You know, I want to introduce all of you to another fellow Tiger streamer, Tiger Faye. They are have been a long time friend of mine for like almost a year, it feels like. They are one of my earliest followers, and I love their content. And they are playing Baccarat, which is a super, super cute game. So let's, I believe they and their partner are playing. This is not live, away from home. Okay, so this is a restream of when they were playing. We'll We'll find somebody who's live right now. But let's give a shout out to Tiger Faye, because I know they are working on some cool stuff these days.
Toten
Yeah,
would like
that
to
is.
duel his inner
So that's
voice.
Tiger Faye. Their
You can take
partner
it
is
out on me,
Mr.
Toten.
Bear. That's
It's
the
okay.
honey bear, and
Can I
then
do my
a
inner
mutual
voices?
acquaintance
I'm
that
a
is
big
a
girl. I
hyena
can take it.
VTuber. That is
they,
Harlequin. They're Harlequin VT. Also, I think they're from Germany, I believe. Just great streamer. What are you doing? What are you doing? I think Kirill is the vibe. I feel like Kirill's Cindy Lee fan club meeting is the vibe today. Let's go visit Kirill. It's been a couple weeks since I have raided them, so let's go. Leaving a little raid message here. This will be leaving the library. Helps if I spell library correctly. Was just reading Tarzan the Apes. And a little quick Okay. And there we go. So there is our raid message, everyone. Be sure to grab that. And we're going to go ride. We're going to raid Kirill, also known as Orc Florist. Super chill vibes, calm, great streamer. I love their content. Let's give them a shout out before we go, since we have time before the raid message yells at me. Orc Florist. So you guys can see their this might pull up an older. Wow, I don't even know what
Bye.
game that was.
I wasn't expecting that to be that easy.
Okay. Very silly. All right. To Orc Florist, aka Kirill. All right, everyone, hang on tight, and we're gonna go say hi. And alley-oop.